Crystal Stokes here with Get Stoked, a podcast with real and raw conversations with leaders of all types, business owners, managers, executives, and more. Get stoked by their honest and insightful stories and key takeaways that you can use to improve your leadership abilities. Now, if you find this podcast helpful, please subscribe and share it with others. Your support and feedback really makes a difference. Now, without further ado, let's dive in. All right, everybody, Crystal Stokes here with Tianna Crane, who is a certified veterinary technician. And Tianna, I'm going to pass the mic over to you and ask you to introduce yourself.
My name is Tianna Crane. As you said, I am a certified veterinary technician. I've been certified since 2012, so 10 years now. And I've been working in the veterinary industry since I was just out of high school. So since I've been 18, so that's been about 20 years now.
Wow.
So I've worked in a lot of different parts of the industry, from corporate laboratory to private small practice, management, CVT. So I've kind of seen a lot of this.
What role are you currently in?
Currently, I'm working as a practice manager in a small animal hospital just outside of Boulder, Colorado, called Jasper Animal Hospital. So I've been managing there now for about 2.5 years, but I've been working there off and on for about 10 years.
Nice. And could you give us an idea of the size of your practice? I'm thinking about other veterinary leaders that may be listening to this thinking, oh, her practice is similar to mine. Maybe I can relate to some of the challenges she's facing.
Sure. Right now, we are a 7-doctor practice. We have about 30 staff total between, front of house, back of house, doctors, and administrative. So I, for a long time, I'm like, oh, we're a small hospital, but we are growing. I would say, we're a good medium to large size at this point. So.
And do you primarily service small animals, cats and dogs?
Yes. Yep. We get the occasional pocket pet. Birds if we're feeling lucky, but birds or reptiles, but mostly dogs and cats.
And how about you personally? I'm assuming you might have some fur babies or reptile babies or feather babies.
Yes, I have 2 dogs. I have one big mutt thing. She's about 50 pounds. We call her our heart guard brown dog. And then I have a Shiba Inu. So maybe I haven't learned all my lessons yet working in veterinary, but I love them both.
Oh, fabulous. So today on this podcast, we are talking about leadership in the veterinary space and primarily the challenges that leaders are facing. I know you and I have talked before prior to this podcast about your perspective and what you see as happening in the industry at large, as well as what you're experiencing just right there in your own clinic. One of the things we had identified was that the demand for veterinary care really is growing. So I wonder if we could just maybe start there and have you speak to what you're seeing. Yeah,
I definitely have seen an increase in veterinary care personally at our hospital and in the Denver, Colorado area in general. I think the pandemic really contributed a lot to that. People went out and got a lot of pets, or they were home more often with their pets. So they were monitoring them more frequently and noticing things that maybe they wouldn't have before. So, we've certainly seen that. And I think too, with the pandemic, the Great Resignation, right? We've also lost a lot of people out of this industry. As anybody who has worked in the veterinary field knows, pay is not the best thing about our field. And, it's a hard job. It's hard hours. It's a lot of work and sometimes very thankless work. And I think people are starting to really say I don't know if it's really for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I'm seeing almost like a large umbrella. I'm a systems thinker type of person. And, I come at this from the lens of mental health. I'm a coach and a clinician. And, something you and I have talked about offline is the the emotional and kind of physical challenges the veterinary field are facing as individuals with burnout, compassion fatigue, much higher levels of suicide, people leaving the industry because they just are exhausted. And what you're speaking to here is that more and more people need veterinary care, and more people in the veterinary industry are leaving. So that creates a real crunch on the people that are still there trying to do the work.
Right.
So what are you seeing at your hospital or at other hospitals that you may be in connection with? How are they experiencing this, and how are they trying to address it?
I think things move on in the world, and we, learn better, we do better, right? When we know better, we do better. So now that we've kind of identified that these are problems and they're starting to really rear their heads to the point where we're questioning, can I continue being in this field? Can I continue being in veterinary? We're making steps to, take care of mental health. I think we all know the Not One More Vet movement that the veterinary industry has kind of recently adopted. For me, I don't think I know anybody in this field who doesn't know of somebody, a veterinary professional, who has committed suicide or at least attempted suicide. That's a real problem. And I think as we're kind of shedding light on that and recognizing it and speaking it as our truth, we're starting to put things into place. We're focusing on mental health, mental well-being. I've seen a lot more continuing education opportunities that are focusing on things like compassion fatigue and burnout, setting boundaries, which historically we know as veterinary professionals, we are not good at setting boundaries. So, yes. I do see a positive movement in that way in the veterinary field, and I can only hope that it continues.
Yes. And when it comes to the actual how of it, you've mentioned there are more continuing education courses happening. It sounds like there are things that you're trying to do within your practice. Can you be any more specific on how, maybe in a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis, you all try to promote better self-care or mental health practices in your clinic?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very fortunate to work for a doctor that owns our private practice that truly does care about our staff. And she and I and our leadership team collaboratively really focus on that. No, I would say not at the expense of the business, but definitely realizing that if we don't have that part of our business, we don't have a business. Turnover takes, for one position, 6 months to really fill that void between recruiting, training, things like that. So, even coming just from a business standpoint, turnover, burnout, it's a bummer for the bottom line. So, we focus on things like we have a well-being team that's made up of staff only, no leadership, and they come up with ideas of what they want to do to create a better culture in the clinic. We provide excellent benefits to our staff because that's important to us as well. Things such as CE reimbursement, tuition reimbursement, even just little things like health, dental, vision. There's was a long time in the veterinary field where those were pipe dreams, for people cleaning up the kennels. So, we try very hard to make sure that our staff feel appreciated all the time. And that's by both being a good manager and empathizing with their staff and understanding where they're coming from, and I think just overall listening in general. Our staff knows that they can come to us with any issues or concerns, and we let them be engaged in the process. If they have ideas, we take it and run with it. So we make everybody feel like they're contributing directly to the success of the business, and everybody's important in their role.
I love all the things you're saying. As a leadership coach, I often say that listening and being empathetic is so central to being a good leader. Yeah. And fostering trust within your organization, having people feel that they truly can come to you and share what's on their mind, what they need. And then also really having a vision for the company. What do you all stand for? Why do you exist? And reminding everybody about that over and over and over, that we're all here today doing this really hard thing because of boop. We want to save animals. We want to improve the lives of animals. We want to provide excellent medicine, medical care. We want to have clients feel at ease and safe and that they can trust us. There are so many very important roles that each person plays in your company, and reminding them how they all matter. I love what you all are doing with your company. I think that the well-being team, I wrote that down. That's a fabulous idea, that it's not made of leadership. It's just the people in the company coming together. They're the boots on the ground. They know what they're experiencing day to day and what they need, and they can advocate for themselves. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah. And, it was important to us that we didn't have people from management, because we wanted that team to be authentic. We wanted them to feel free to collaborate together and come up with, and sometimes the feedback isn't great. Sometimes I'm like, are you kidding me? Really? You feel that way? I would never have guessed it. But as a leader, it's important for me to know that, even if it sometimes is a painful truth. I mean, think of it this way. If I had a staff member that I needed to correct, I would expect them to take the feedback, constructive criticism, and handle it professionally. And how can I expect that if I'm not willing to do the same?
Right. So you lead by example.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm going to segue into another question that I had here, which is the crunch that veterinary staff often feel when it comes to the relationship with the client. So I have been on the sides of both veterinary medicine and human medicine. And I noticed a big difference that when we go to a medical doctor, for us humans, well, first of all, we usually have a copay, or if for some reason our insurance doesn't cover it, it's out of network, or we haven't met the deductible and it's going to cost a few thousand. It may really upset us, but nevertheless, we kind of expect human medicine to be expensive. We have a lot of respect for the doctors that we go to, and there's just a whole atmosphere around how we engage in human medicine. And I'd love for you to speak to your perception of what the general population, the clients, may feel and perceive the veterinary doctors and industry, how it may be different from human medicine.
Yes. I think that for me personally, the hospital I work in right now is actually in a fairly affluent area. So we don't have a lot of compliance issues or, people that complain too hard about the bill. But, in general, working throughout the field, I feel like there's this dichotomy where people love their animals enough to that it's their family. And when they go to the veterinarian, they feel as though we are an extension of that family. And that's what we want them to feel, right? We want them to know that we do truly care about their pet and, love their pet just as much as they do. So there, like I said, there's this dichotomy when you have come in and you're like, okay, here's the bill. And they sometimes, I think people in their head realize this is a business, but in their heart, they're like, if you really love animals, why would you charge me? And that is the prevailing theme for years throughout the veterinary industry that I feel like has been a huge struggle, which, again, as we were talking about earlier, contributes to the burnout and compassion fatigue, because there are a lot of veterinary professionals that feel as though, like, gosh, let's just do it this one time, or we'll cut him a break or whatever. And then what happens is we create this cycle where we're creating an expectation that this is going to happen each time. And then if it doesn't keep happening, whether at our hospital or another hospital down the line, now it's like, now you're taking advantage of the client, or the client feels as though they're being taken advantage of. And that's setting each other up as veterinary professionals for failure.
Yeah. I think that too, we look further down the path too, like how this spirals out of control, which is, let's say I come into your practice and I'm upset that it's so expensive. And I ask you, can you this one time just, help me out financially, and you give me a 50% discount. Mm-hmm. Well, then that's revenue that your company is not making. That's money that you cannot use to hire really talented staff or even pay your staff a living wage. We know that in the veterinary industry, that's been a problem in small practices where staff do not make enough income to pay back their student loans, which is, again, creating a lot of that burnout and fatigue that veterinarians feel, but they can't get out from under crushing debt, but they're working 60 hours a week.
Yes.
So, right, there's this downward spiral of, if the veterinary company can't even make enough to thrive and really take care of their team, it's whole oxygen mask analogy. They can't get their oxygen mask on because they're just helping all these clients by giving them discounts and not even covering their basic operating costs. I think the general population of humans out here, it's hard to understand how expensive it is to provide veterinary services. The equipment alone, to run that office, rent for the building, paying for all this staff, training of the staff, keeping everything in compliance. It's really complicated. It is a medical facility. And I think that that's not evident always to the masses.
Yes. I've had conversations. One sticks out particularly with a client who, he wanted to just come in and get rabies vaccines for his dog that we hadn't seen in a couple years. And we said, unfortunately, that has to be done with the doctor by law. We have to do an exam. And I spoke to him because he was upset because he said to me verbatim, I don't like that you guys treat this as a business. And it was one of the first conversations I had as a manager at this clinic I'm at now. And I said, sir, respectfully, this is a business. I have staff to pay. I can't buy vaccines if other people don't pay for them, syringes, needles, gloves, disposal, like you said, the building overhead, all that stuff, it costs a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And, in the medical field, we have state-of-the-art equipment and hospitals. In the veterinary field, we've basically spit in a prayer. We have, machines that have been running on duct tape for 20 years and things like that. So, as much as we try to cut costs, it still costs money to run that business. And there's that dichotomy where people are like, but if you loved my animal, you would just do it. Well, right. I truly love your animal. I wouldn't be able to do it if I didn't charge you. So
how do you think we change this model? What needs to happen for this to turn around?
Well, I think there's a lot to be said about setting those boundaries and setting those expectations up front. When we tend to be like, well, do it for you, then we start this spiral of, now I have to do it for the next client who's my friend and this kind of thing. I think we have to be comfortable with saying my services are valuable, my time is valuable, and I deserve to be paid for it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I'm very operationally minded. I always think about the nitty gritty of how, and this starts maybe before a person even walks in the door. It starts with your website presence. Like, are your policies and procedures really clear? From the moment they walk in the door, do they understand what's going to occur, the possibilities of the charges before they are even in the session? I understand that in veterinary medicine, in an emergency, that can be difficult because they're coming in, it's an emergency, we're moving really fast, but how could we solve that? I really like to think about the tangible solutions that we can implement right now in our practices, from the front of the house to the back of the house, that the message is always consistent. The entire team is on the same page. We all feel united together and having each other's back. Because if the receptionist says it's this, and the technician agrees, and the doctor's like, well, I guess we could, that's not consistent. So consistent boundaries across the board. And it all goes back to what you said in the very beginning around boundaries, and that often people that enter the helping professions are highly empathetic. And that sometimes goes hand in hand with weaker boundaries, like feeling so much empathy for the other person. We don't want to cause them pain. So then we don't hold the boundary. But in reality, holding that boundary for the long-term care and for these animals to thrive is necessary. So it seems like we need some retraining ourselves in terms of boundaries and upholding them, and then creating some systems around the communication of this with clients as they walk in the door.
Absolutely. And, there are more and more resources now for veterinary professionals to help with these type of things, like programs that doctors, like veterinarians, have implemented for mental well-being. We actually, at my hospital we're at now, a few years ago, actually hired an outside mental well-being consulting company to come in, and they met with every employee. They had all of our leadership team take personality tests. That was fun. And, gave us feedback with that and said, hey, these are the things that we think you can improve to help your staff. And we actually, our doctors paid for us to have like personal counseling, career coaching sessions with them, just to kind of help us understand how we could help our own house, and that was such a wonderful service that, I wish there was more hospitals that could do that.
I'm so glad to hear that you got to experience that. Can you say a little bit more about the benefits of that? Like, what were the effects once that program was implemented? What changes did you see?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that people felt more invested in their job. They felt as though we were walking the talk, so to speak. It's like, it's one thing to say, oh, we care about our staff and have a pizza party every couple months, but it's another thing for us to say, you know what, we're going to spend some serious coin and we're going to invest in the well-being of our team, because that's what we feel is best for the industry overall. If we can contribute to that and be a leader in that, then maybe other people will follow. Can
you speak to the ROI? Because we're all business people here. And I think if I'm going to drop some serious money to bring in these outside consultants or an outside program to do this, it's kind of risky. Like, is it really going to be worth it? Absolutely. Speak to that. Yeah. Yeah. And we all know veterinarians, right? They're skeptical till the end. They're like, should I spend money on this or should I buy that new centrifuge? But, the ROI for us has been retained staff. We have, other than for medical reasons, we have not really lost a lot of staff in the last probably 3 years, much less turnover than any other clinic that I've ever worked, which has helped us in obviously not having to hire more talent other than just from our business growing and needing the extra, resources, but also just in the level of care that our staff has. In my opinion, they truly care about their job and what they do. And they know that we give them the freedom to do their job to the best of their ability, which is what I think all of us want. Oh, it melts my heart. The work that I do when I come into veterinary hospitals is very much driven on results. I want to see the company thrive. That's the point. And when your staff feels taken care of and aligned and supported and that there's trust in the organization, they stick around and they perform better. So you have people that are efficient, that are enthusiastic about doing their jobs, that it's create a self-care environment. There's less burnout, there's less exhaustion, there's less days off. And when you really have a team that's united together and they've been together for years, that kind of synergy that happens of how they work together is amazing. I really appreciate the experience that you all have had. And this is an example of bringing something like that in-house that has really worked for you all. Yeah. Yep. And it also creates consistency in the medicine that we practice, right? So it is good overall for our bottom line, because that is something that clients do comment on. They're like, I never see the same doctor every time I come in. Well, now they've been seeing the same doctor for the last 4 or 5 years. So they feel more comfortable and capable. So that helps with client retention as well as employee retention. Wow. I didn't even think of that. That's a great point. Yeah. So I'm looking at our clock and I'm like, oh, there was one more thing, but I don't think we're gonna have time to get to that one last point I had on my list. I think we're gonna save it for episode number 2, because it in itself is probably a whole nother rabbit hole we could go down. I'm going to segue, if you're okay with it, into some of the rapid fire questions. All right. Lay it on me. I'm wondering, as a veterinary leader, what's one of the most important things you've learned?
For me, I think the biggest thing that I have to take away from as a leader is if it's important to somebody on my staff, it has to be important to me. You know, there might be something that I am like, oh my God, you guys are complaining about what? Like that would not even cross my radar. But if it's important to them, it has to be important to me because what I am is an advocate and I'm an extension of the staff. And it's my job to make sure that they have what they need to be taken care of. So I have to give them that support. And I think that's probably the most important thing for me as a leader to give to my team is to care about the same things that they care about.
Yes. So much of being a leader, it's almost as if we could replace the word leadership with support. How can I best support you to be your very best self? And it sounds like that's exactly what you're trying to do.
Yeah. I think my team knows I would never ask them to do anything that I personally would not or could not do. I've been in the trenches with them. I still work as a tech on weekends, so we don't have to have as many rotations on weekends. And it's important to me to really know what my techs and my doctors are going through so that I can support them because that ultimately is what's best for the business.
If you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what advice would you give her?
Oh man, I would I would probably tell her that, it's going to get better. Like I said, I've been in the veterinary field for 20 years. I don't know if I've mentioned this to you before, but my younger sister and my little brother are also vet techs. So when my sister went to school, she was like, I think I want to be a vet tech. I, at the time, actually told her, I don't think you should do it. It's not good pay. It's a hard job. And this was probably like 10 years ago, but I would have, if I could go back and talk to myself then, I'd be like, no, let her do it. And it gets better. And I think as long as we all keep working towards, setting those boundaries and making sure that we have the mental well-being taken care of, that it's going to keep getting better.
You segue perfectly into my last rapid fire question, which is, do you have any daily habits or routines that help keep you healthy mentally, physically in this really busy role that you play?
I have a Peloton. I love to work out on my bike. I am a big fan of meditation as well. And I'm not good at it, but I like to paint and kayak. I mean, I live in Colorado, so I do a lot of outdoorsy stuff anyway. But, there are times where I have to literally schedule that in my calendar just because, I got a lot going on, but it's important. And, we a lot of times treat it as an afterthought. And whether it's meditation or karate or whatever it is that you're doing, make the time to do it. Treat it like it's your job because otherwise you're not going to be able to do it.
Yep. I made this, the word doesn't necessarily describe what it is, but I've always called it reverse calendaring. So normally the way we do our calendar or our schedule is you put in all the things like work and obligations first. Then you try to squeeze in self-care or friends and family, they get put to the margins. And reverse calendaring for me means I actually schedule those important things first. The values of self-care, or if there's certain friends or family I need to spend time with, those things I put into my calendar first in blue, which is my favorite color. And then I build the work around it. And that is the only way it would get done for me, because I used to be the opposite, all work and no play. And I learned the hard way, burnout, to not do that. So I appreciate your tip very much. And I will keep practicing it.
Yes, definitely. It's a great habit to be into. And it's such a necessary one. And one that I think is also important to say you are worth doing for.
Yes.
It's not something that you do when you have time.
Yes, it's mandatory. It should be like oxygen, sleeping, the things that are just required for you to just be a human on the planet. And if you're here to do wonderful work, which we are, then we deserve to feel our very best.
Yes. You can't give the best care unless you're the best version of yourself.
Yep. Well said. Now, Tianna, people may be listening to this right now. They may have a similar practice to you. They may be interested in some of these ideas that you all have implemented. If they want to get in touch with you and learn more about how you did this in your veterinary hospital, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
They can reach me on my LinkedIn profile, or they can email me directly. I have tcranecvt@gmail.com is my email. So, any way that works for them works for me.
Great. So it's T Crane, and that's spelled Crane.
Yes. Yep.
Great. And I'll link that up. Great. I'll put all that in the show notes so people don't have to go searching for it, so they can find you. And Tianna, I really appreciate your time today. It's been fabulous to talk to you.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate the chance to talk about these important things in this field.
Absolutely. Me too. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that you feel stoked after listening to this episode. And as always, I would love to hear your comments and feedback. Is there a topic that you want to know more about? Please let me know. And thank you again for subscribing and sharing your favorite episodes with others. It really means a lot.